Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Erin Newcomb and Jonathan Bennett join me. We're going to have an open source chat about all sorts of things. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randal Schwartz, Erin Newcomb, and Jonathan Bennett. Episode 559, recorded December 11th, 2019. Open Source Chat. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center is like no other testing and research lab with more than $500 million of equipment. And it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and get insights into all that it offers, go to wwt.com/twit. And by Melissa. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 businesses count on Melissa for clean, reliable address data. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I'm your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects you may be using every day and aren't aware of it, projects you might want to play with right after this show. Today might be one of those. I am currently in Seaside, and I if you go back to the previous Seaside show, I think you'd see the same stupid background. It's a sand dollar or no, starfish sitting on something. And because of the only real place I can sit in the room, it becomes my halo. So I didn't put that deliberately there. It just sort of turned out that way. Well, we have sort of a different show today, and I'll explain why in a minute. But before I do, let's bring on our panelists. Yes, this is a panel show. This will be a lot of fun. First, we'll say Erin Newcomb. Erin, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Randall. I don't know if that's a halo or kind of like your Bob Ross costume from Halloween, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, that could be it. But Bob Ross had darker hair, so it's not quite the same thing. And you're speaking to us from your lair, your secret lair?
Yeah, the secret lair here. Of course, you never get to see my side of things. At some point, I'll switch. I'll sit over there, and then you can see all my crap, right, on this side of the room. And before you introduce Jonathan, here's a thing I usually do, been doing. I'll try to keep doing this. People seem to like it. So something I'm working on, right? So this is I don't know if you're familiar with these. This is a virtual floppy drive, right? So it accepts USB here. And you can use it as a floppy drive. And what I use these for is for Amigas and Atari STs that had the floppy drive in the side. And in order to get disk images on them more easily, I use one of these. And you can see I've tricked this one out a little bit. I've actually added up here, I've added a speaker, which actually does the floppy noises, right? So it vibrates along with the disk access, which is kind of cool. Nice. And then I've added this OLED display here. It used to have a little 7-segment display array, and so I've added that in so you can actually see the disk image and stuff like that. So that's kind of my little project for the week that I'm working on.
And happy late birthday.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, my birthday was on the 27th.
A week ago.
It was great. Yeah, we went to Hawaii, and it was also our 25th anniversary, so it was doubly special. So we decided to go to Hawaii and spend some time there. It was awesome.
Cool. And we have our other panelists, although really since we're all panelists this time, I'm playing the host role just because it's my show. But we also, let's bring on again Jonathan Newcomb. No, not Newcomb, Jonathan Bennett. They apparently let anybody do
I have a
show.
Cousin, Jonathan Newcomb. Maybe.
Oh, really? Let's go get him. And you're in Oklahoma, your typical spot there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm the bad penny that just keeps showing up here in flyover city of Oklahoma.
Right. Well, the reason this is a different show and you aren't seeing any guests is apparently our guests' email system is filtering my email to them somehow, and I don't know why. And some of them went through. He keeps sending me like, what's the link I'm supposed to go to get on the show and stuff, and I can't send anything to him, so I can't actually tell him. Maybe if I told him that his email is still broken because he seems to be watching the show. So your email is broken. Fix your email because I sent you 9 emails already. Okay, that's how that works. So you're not going to be on the show this time because your email is broken. All right. So hopefully maybe we'll get him on again on something in a future schedule. So what we're doing instead is I'm going to be a little experimental. We pulled this all together in the last 24 hours, Jonathan and Erin and I. So what we're going to try to do, I don't normally cover news in this show because I don't really follow open source news very often. I know that sounds weird. I mean, that's why these shows are all like what I call a magazine show, where we do a 45-minute interview that can still be useful 4 or 5 years from now. So I kind of like that. And I'm not very good at this, but apparently both Erin and Jonathan have potential stories they want to talk about. I've got a couple. But this today is also interestingly conflicting for me because there's a new Flutter developer conference. And it goes all day, so I'm going to miss the middle third of it because I'm here taping the show. I did watch the keynote, though, and a bunch of stuff came out of the keynote. Flutter has gone in amazing multiple directions. We had Eric Seidel, the lead of the Flutter project, on. Oh, I should have Googled for what show that was. If you just Google Flutter and FLOSS Weekly, you'll probably find it. Sorry. So I'm probably going to take a segment somewhere a little later in the hour and tell all the things I know about the changes in Flutter. I'm getting more and more excited about where it's going, what it's doing, all that sort of stuff. So Erin and Jonathan, you want to say anything before I read the ad?
I'll just say I'm kind of excited to go through some of this stuff as we were kind of scrambling over the past few days to put some of this together. I started thinking back about all the stories that just kind of came to the top of my head of stuff that I read on my phone every day, open source related stories. And there was a lot of them actually this year. So I'm really excited to talk about some of this and to hear other people's opinion, and hopefully the chat room will chime in as well. And it should be really fun.
And by the way, I didn't announce that, but if you're in the chat room, we have quite a few people in the chat room. And you want to ask us anything, I mean, feel free, a particular topic, a particular way to use software, thing like that. So if you're not watching this live, you're not going to be able to do that because you can't just scream at your podcaster. That will not help. You're not at the right place at the right time. And there's always the Twit forum. So is it twit.forum? Yeah. No, twit.community. You can go there and ask some questions of us as well. So for this show, we'll be watching that for extra questions that you didn't get into because of that. And Jonathan, anything before I read the ad?
Well, just thinking through the month and the year, open source has had a big year, a chaotic year in some ways, a problematic year, but lots and lots of stuff happening. So I'm really interested to dive into it with you guys.
Cool. And again, this is sort of experimental. We came up with it at the last minute, trying to figure out what we could do when the guest doesn't respond to any of my email. Okay, sorry, I'll stop griping about that now, but this was really awkward that we had. It was just silent. I would just say something and nothing would come back. And every once in a while, he would send me an email saying, do I need to know anything about how to be on the show? I'd go, I sent it to you 4 times already. All right, anyway, let me go ahead and pay some bills. So this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT began building its Advanced Technology Center, ATC, 10 years ago, and it's grown exponentially. The lab contains more than $500 million in equipment. It's like no other testing and research lab. WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need to make sure their business runs right. Their ATC is an incubator for IT innovation. Hundreds of on-demand and schedulable labs representing the newest advances in multi-cloud architecture, security, networking, primary and secondary storage, data analytics, and AI DevOps, and so much more. Learn about products before you launch. WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proofs of concept and pilots using the sandbox so customers can confidently select their best solutions. In many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases speed to market. They offer Lab as a Service, a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. It's virtual, so you can take full advantage of ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world, 24/7. WWT's engineers work in these labs every day, beta testing new equipment and building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make decisions and see the results faster and with much less investment. WWT has launched its new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. This ecosystem creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for its customers. Get access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make a difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about worldwide technology and join the ATC ecosystem, go to wwt.com/twit and create an account today. WWT simplifies the complex. It's wwt.com/TWIT. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. We appreciate WWT's sponsorship of FLOSS Weekly. And I usually hand off to the guest, but who wants to start?
Actually, but now that the ad's over and I don't have to recuse myself, I will say WWT is actually pretty interesting. They're a good partner of ours, both AppDynamics and Cisco's, and I've been out to their facilities. If you have the chance, if you're in St. Louis, go out and visit them. It's a pretty cool place. They call themselves the Silicon Valley of St. Louis. And which I find very funny, just living near Silicon Valley. But they really are. They do some really cool stuff out there, and the lab program that they talked about is really neat. So I'll just put in an additional plug for them real quick because they do some really cool stuff.
Cool. And anything to start with people, or do you want me to go immediately to my Flutter stuff?
No. We want to talk about Linux news, Randall. Come on. Because I know if we let you start talking about Flutter, that's it for the show, right? You're just going to go and go.
It'll be the whole show.
We can catch up on some things that we've talked about in the past. I know it wasn't too long ago. We had the Perl guys on, and Perl 6 has officially been renamed Raku. And so Perl 5 and now Raku are splitting and being developed in parallel. It's kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Randall, what's for sure. What do you think, Randall?
Of what? I'm not the Linux guy.
Perl 6 and Perl 6 and Raku.
Raku. Okay, well, the problem for many years is that people confused Perl 6 as being the next thing after Perl 5, and we're talking about how, does that mean Perl 5 development has stopped? No, actually, it's gotten much more rapid and deep. There's now quarterly patch releases. There's yearly, possibly breaking releases, and it's really being maintained well. I mean, I have a tough time just going through the change logs for Perl 5, and so there's a lot more ecosystem. There's a lot more people working on stuff, but the problem is people were seeing this name Perl 6. And they were thinking, then I can just drop my Perl 5 programs into it. Well, I understand it's the same problem with Python 2 and Python 3, that it's not, it's only mostly compatible. It's not completely compatible. And so you can't just drop Perl 2, you can't drop Perl 2 programs into Python 3. They definitely won't work. You can't drop Python 2 programs into Python 3. And the same thing is that Perl 6 was never really meant to be, the next Perl, except in the sense that the spirit of Perl 5 is clearly in Perl 6, the kind of doing lots of complex things easily and making a lot more things possible and stuff. So it was finally decided that, you needed a different name for it. It can't just be Perl 6, as much as that's been sort of drilled into people's heads about what it actually is. It brings along with it a lot of this baggage of it being something that's backward compatible with Perl 5. Although you can embed Perl 5 in Perl 6, which is sort of weird. So you could actually run, in Raku now, because it's called Raku. I wasn't in on most of the discussion on Raku, so I can't tell you the detailed histories of it. I'm much more interested in Dart. in Flutter than I am in Perl 6. And I probably won't do much with Perl 6 except attend Perl conferences, which tend to talk about Perl 6 on a few tracks. And then I attend those, and I see them do really weird-looking things. This is from a guy who did Perl 5. Perl 6 looks really weird to me still. So I'm going to focus on Dart and Flutter coming on the way out. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. If you got other input, sure.
It is really interesting to compare what's happened with Perl and now Raku with what's currently happening with Python 2, Python 3, because they're in a similar place in both languages. They've said, let's go back and make some big changes, some breaking changes. But in Perl, they're maintaining both of those forks intentionally, whereas in Python, they're trying to deprecate Python 2. And boy, that's making life difficult for a lot of people. I'm sure when we talk about some other things later, like the Raspberry Pi, we'll talk some more about that. But you've got places where there's lots and lots of code that's now suddenly becoming legacy code, and it's just interesting to see these two different ways of going about this problem.
Yeah, it seems like it happens with almost every language. I don't know if this has happened so much in the C world, right? But it seems like all of the more modern languages have had this problems over the years. And it's pretty long in the tooth. I mean, it's not like Python in this case, because I'm more familiar with Python. Well, for Perl too. I mean, Perl 6 has been talked about for ages, right? But it's not like we're, excuse me, the developers are saying, or the people who are coding the language are saying, move over right now. I mean, they've been saying you need to move your code to Python 3 for like the past, 4 years, 5 years, right? So people have had plenty of warning. But when a language like Perl or Python, for sure, one of the top programming languages right now, has been around for so long and people use it for so much stuff, it's almost like a Y2K problem. It's hard to go back and update all that code to the newer standards when things get depreciated.
Well, you mentioned C. That's interesting. So we have C, which still exists for obvious reasons. You have C#, you have Objective-C, you have C++, and probably 2 or 3 other variants that I can't think of off the top of my head. So I think, that is an interesting point. That's something that happens with just about every language.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough to. Larry did an amazing job, Larry Wall, in creating a Perl 1 that you can still take almost any Perl 1 program and drop it into Perl 5 and it works. I mean, there's that much compatibility across all the 30 years of releases. So I think Larry had the foresight to go, I want to have a language definition that can withstand the test of time. And he succeeded. But that's why Perl 6 was so amazing, because it was a break. And, how did that happen? But it's because one of the problems in the Perl 5 code base is that there's a lot of cruft. There's a lot of things that sort of crawled in over the years, and bring things in like that. So, anyway, next segment, whoever wants to go.
I wanted to talk about IBM buying Red Hat in terms of big stories. I mean, it seems like that's one of the bigger stories of the year. It took a little while. Obviously, they announced it. I think it was. By the beginning of the year, the end of last year. It's been like 12 months since they announced it, and then it actually became final. And I think this is huge. Back in the day, there was a bit of consternation, if you will, between folks like IBM and Microsoft and the Linux world, and Red Hat came out in a big way. Red Hat was the first Linux distribution that I ever used. My first introduction to Linux was Red Hat, installing Red Hat like 5, I think, not the current Red Hat, but the old one. It was before it became a big company, back in like 97 or something. I think it was Red Hat 4 actually. But I remember installing that on floppy drives over FTP, and I thought that was like the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, how do you install a whole operating system over, just based off of one floppy drive, and everything installs over FTP? It was crazy. But this is big news, and this was something that IBM did for competitive reasons, right? So it's not just that they're swallowing up this thing where they think there might be a future. They're swallowing up because of the state of the present, in which Red Hat is actually deploying things like OpenShift that are becoming really popular and having a lot of traction with people deploying applications to cloud infrastructure or cloud-like infrastructure, because I know you can kind of install OpenShift wherever. But and they saw that as the future, and they bought them for $34 billion.
Did you say million or billion?
Billion with a B.
Oh, you're kidding!
$34 billion, and it's at the time, I think it still is the biggest software acquisition ever. ZDNet did a nice article, the beloved, or my beloved anyway, Stephen Von Nichols, who I think is great. He's been covering this stuff forever. Did a great article on why they bought them, and really it's all about the cloud.
Well, Oregon, what am I saying? Oracle. we were talking about Oregon before the start of the show, so I was thinking Oregon for a second, and I'm in Oregon, which is kind of unusual for me, apparently. Oracle bought Sun, and wasn't that a pretty big deal?
It was, yeah. I was at Sun at the time, and then worked for Oracle for a number of years. That was $7 billion.
Oh, okay. So we're got
compared to this, which was 34. Well, I don't think so. I mean, there's inflation. Okay. I mean, if you think about the properties that Sun had at that point, Sun had a lot of open source properties, but they also had all the hardware properties. Solaris. They had Solaris. I mean, which was kind of declining at the time, but it was still pretty big in the enterprise space. So it's amazing for me to go back and think about what a steal that one was, and then this one, $34 billion, and it appears that IBM is starting to think about, what I think is going to happen is that they're going to restructure their cloud offerings, because IBM has had a lot of cloud offerings in the past, however many years, right? They've had kind of different ones where you could build off of depending on what flavor of cloud you like. But I think that's going to morph into now using OpenShift as really the heart of their cloud offering, or at least one of their cloud offerings going forward, because I think they're going to take advantage of all the momentum that OpenShift has, which is really cool if you haven't played with it.
Yeah, we had OpenShift on the show way back. Maybe somebody can Google that, because I don't want to get too much distracted there. And I was playing with it for a while, but it's like it wasn't quite. It was interesting because it was really one of the first platform as a service things. So that you're not managing the actual machine, you're just managing your installs of your assets. So that was a really interesting thing. There's a few others in that market now too, right? Besides OpenShift.
Oh yeah, Pivotal's been around for a long time. If you want to look at the open source side of that would be Cloud Foundry. But Pivotal Cloud Foundry is a company that offers that obviously as a service. They're leaning heavily towards Kubernetes at this point to kind of drive what they're doing. But I see them as they're distinct, but they're kind of parallel in that you can pick up either OpenShift or Pivotal Cloud Foundry, run it on-prem, run it in the cloud, depending on what your needs are. So it's really interesting. And I think, I was at Red Hat. What's Red Hat's big conference? All of a sudden my brain is not working. Chat room can tell me what's Red Hat's conference they do in the spring in Boston. Anyway. Oh,
I've been there.
Yeah, I was there last year. And the interesting thing to me at that conference, and I called it out when I got back to work, people were asking me how the conference was that they really focused on open source. And at that time, the IBM acquisition was looming. They had a whole, the keynotes are really valuable, right? Because everybody goes to the keynote. That's like your valuable time to get on stage and talk about whatever it is. I mean, they spent a whole one of the keynote sessions, like 3 hours, just talking about their commitment to open source. And I don't know this for a fact, I haven't talked to anybody there, but I think one of the reasons they did that was because they knew the IBM acquisition was about to be approved or go forward or whatever, and they needed to reassure people that their commitment to open source was still there, even though IBM was, about to finalize the acquisition. So really interesting to see, and kudos for Red Hat too for staying true to their core and supporting open source for all these years.
Yeah, that's kind of an important point. So especially you mentioned Oracle buying Sun, and then you look at what happened afterwards.
Yes.
All of the open source things that Sun was doing, Oracle has either killed or tried to kill. And so far, IBM seems to be, taking a hands-off approach and saying, all right, we're going to let all this stuff continue. We're going to integrate this stuff. We're going to use it. And it's refreshing but you kind of have to sit back and hope. Boy, I hope they don't mess this up, because it's really great what Red Hat's been doing.
Yep, for sure.
The only thing Oracle hasn't killed yet that was good stuff at Sun is VirtualBox. I don't think they know they own it.
I love it. I still use VirtualBox. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's open source. It can do live migration, which I didn't realize it could, which is really fun. So you can have you set up a VirtualBox that's running something, and then you fire up a new one, and you can squirt them across, and it basically finally generates it copies as much as it can, keeping up to date, but it then stops it just for a second to make that final pass, and all of a sudden you're running on another box, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So,
yeah. Andromedan says we should try to get the chat room in here too. Andromedan says Oracle is doing some new open source projects like Helidon, and they are, and they're still supporting MySQL or MySQL. To a certain degree. I still use that, of course, when I'm not using Maria or something else. But it's true. It's just that, knowing Larry from a distance, of course, but just having been in the room with him and hear him speak and things, you kind of have to look at their commitment over the years and think, I'm glad they're doing it. I support them. I hope that that works. But the amount of faith that I have in some of those projects, just because they're coming from Oracle, is probably a little bit less than they would be if they were coming from Red Hat. So I'm biased, I guess.
All right.
It's kind of tough.
Got the next story?
I was just going to say, it's kind of tough to talk about Red Hat without talking about CentOS. CentOS 8. CentOS 8 just released. And so you mentioned the old Red Hat Linux distribution. Well, then Red Hat put out RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And sometime along the line, somebody looked at the open source licenses and said, we could just rebuild all of their code, take all of their branding out, and release it as a community enterprise Linux, which is where CentOS came from. And then back 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember exactly when, Red Hat said, we really like what you guys are doing. How about we officially adopt the CentOS project and bring it into the Red Hat fold? Which I guess that was another one of those situations where a lot of people maybe got nervous about it, but they seem to have done well with it. Well, just the last few months, CentOS 8, based on RHEL 8, was released, and they did something real interesting. They also have a CentOS Stream. Have you guys looked into CentOS Stream or used Red Hat 8 yet?
I have not. What is Stream?
It is basically a rolling release that, from what I can tell, it is based currently on 8, and it's going to be a rolling release all the way to 9. And so it's kind of like, it kind of sits between Fedora and Red Hat. And so what Red Hat is doing is they're leveraging that CentOS community, and they're saying, hey, how about we do this work for you and let you guys be essentially our beta testers for what's going to be RHEL 9. It's pretty interesting.
Cool.
That is interesting and much needed. I mean, there was always, for the link between, in my opinion, and granted, I've been more of a Debian guy for the past 10 years, probably, or 8 years. I used to be solely Red Hat based, right? And I remember that it seemed to be a pretty big disconnect, right, between not a huge disconnect, but they were both obviously built on the same kernels and same architecture. But looking at Fedora, going from Fedora and then trying to jump all the way from Fedora to RHEL was a huge leap, right? All the new stuff, all the new desktop stuff was in Fedora, all the cool gadgets and gizmos and wobbly windows and all that kind of stuff you wanted to use was in Fedora. That stuff was never going to make it to RHEL. And so there was never this kind of an intro or a way to get your feet wet with the latest kernel, for example, that you would want to do in a way that would apply to running RHEL in a data center or in the cloud or in a business, right? And so it's really good to hear that they're doing that with CentOS. I think that's great. It seems cluttered to have Fedora, CentOS, and RHEL to me a little bit. But I think it's great that they have this kind of intro or beta experience basically with CentOS. If you're going to run RHEL, it's great to have that maybe running kind of as a dev environment. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, so there's some open questions about it. Like what I don't know is can you run CentOS Stream, and then when they branch it for CentOS 9 and RHEL 9, of course, can you go in there and flip a switch and say, all right, I want to go to CentOS 9 stable after this, and then go in and flip another switch and say, I want to continue updating past, stay with the Stream release. And so I'm not sure even that they know exactly how all of that's going to work when the time comes. But at the same time, it's exciting because, like you say, let's see, CentOS 6 is still supported. And you get on a CentOS 6 box and, oh man, it is crusty because, you're talking about an old kernel and everything is just old. I love the idea of rolling release, and I love that somebody is trying to make a kind of a server grade rolling release. It's just exciting.
So I still want to keep going on because I want to get at least a little bit of time in for Flutter. So but before we do that, I have an important message. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by the leader in address verification, Melissa. Every address it's covered from Adelaide, Australia, to Zipacada, Colombia, and everywhere in between. We all know there's nothing good about bad data. It costs money, hurts sales, and decreases customer satisfaction. If bad addresses, duplicate records, and bouncing emails are hurting your business, isn't it time to come clean with Melissa? Delta Faucet, Z1 Motorsports, and Car2Go use Melissa. You should too. Delta Faucet was able to improve their call center processes with global address autocompletion. Melissa was able to reduce the fraudulent e-commerce transactions for Z1 Motorsports by 90%. Melissa provides a full spectrum of data quality protection for your customer data. Verify postal addresses, mobile numbers, and email addresses. Update the addresses of customers that have moved and eliminate duplicate records. Gain additional customer insight into your data with Melissa's analytics. Easily build address, verification, and customer data validation into your custom application using Melissa's APIs, CRM cloud connectors, and e-commerce plugins, or upload your customer file for a quick data cleanse. Melissa is serious about securely managing your data. They continually undergo independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Mailers spend about $20 billion annually in undeliverable mail. Don't lose customers or cash. Make every address count. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 organizations worldwide trust Melissa to get their customer data clean and accurate. Get started today with 25,000 records clean for free at melissa.com/twit. Again, that's melissa.com/TWIT, or call 1-800-MELISSA to find out more. And we thank Melissa for their support of FLOSS Weekly. And let's take another Linux question or something first, and then I'll start my Flutter stuff.
So we had a question from the chat room, actually, that I think might be good to stuff in here.
Sure.
Chickenhead21 says, a question for Erin Newcomb. Did you get into programming because of being a maker, or became a maker because of programming?
Good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I've actually been asked this before, and I don't know if there's a good answer. They kind of go together in my mind. I would say that so here's the deal. As I was thinking about how to answer this question, I mean, I started pulling apart my toys, especially since it is around Christmas time. My parents would always joke that they didn't want to buy me anything expensive because, I would play with it for like a day, right? And then out comes the screwdriver and I would take it apart. That started when I was about 7 years old. And I've been doing that ever since, right? You can tell everything in my room is pretty much in a state of disrepair, or not disrepair, but unrepair. I don't know what the word. I've taken everything apart. Anyway, and then I started actually programming on the TRS-80 color computer in BASIC when I was probably, I want to say 9 or maybe 10. It's my first language I learned was BASIC. And so to me, they kind of go hand in hand. For a long time, they were separate in my mind, right? Yeah, I love to take apart toys and build Frankenstein toys, kind of like from Toy Story. That kid that would do that was me. And then the other side, which was, playing games and building my own games for the TRS-80 color computer. I saw those as two separate things. And then, more recently, like in the past 10 years, I've seen that those things really go hand in hand because you're building something and you want it to do something, like my doorbell, for example, right? I built the doorbell physically, but then I want it to play, music from arcade games when someone rings the doorbell. And so I needed software to make that work. And so today they really go hand in hand. I don't know if that's a full answer. I think the two things really at this point are kind of considered the same thing. At the makerspace, we have programming nights, we have Arduino Raspberry Pi nights. Often the topics merge together because you just have to. They just go hand in hand at this point.
Well, in thinking about that question, and my kind of my own history, there were a couple of things that were light bulb moments for me, and one was the Arduino. Because suddenly you can write code and then hook up a relay and turn things on and off and interact with things. And then the other thing that kind of is in the same ballpark as that is 3D printing, where you can write code and do design and suddenly turn it into something real. And so it's really interesting to see these two, what used to be in some ways disparate realms. I think they lit up the same portions of our brains apparently. But they used to be, separated realms, or now they're colliding, and it's almost all one hobby, one passion.
Yep. Well said.
Well, go ahead.
No, okay, that's it. I want to hear about Flutter. I don't know if I'm not sure what this Flutter stuff is. Randall, is there something going on with Flutter these days?
Yes, there's a lot going on. It's huge. Today, like I said, I think I said at the open of the show, today is a Flutter Developers Conference, and I'm a Flutter GDE, so I have to give that as a disclaimer. GDE is a Google Developer Expert in the areas of Flutter and Dart and Web for some reason, because apparently when you got Flutter, you automatically got Web. Because that was one of the things. Or no, when you get Dart, you got Web, because that was the main target for Dart. But so let me back up a step and describe this. We've done 3 shows. If you Google for FLOSS Weekly and either Dart or Flutter, you'll pick them up. But so Dart was originally created to replace the sort of awkward Java Web Toolkit, Google Web Toolkit, which required writing everything in Java and then compiling some of that to JavaScript for the client side. So you had the server side in Java, which I hate. Java's ugly. And then the client side, it was JavaScript, but you never really saw the JavaScript because you were compiling it from a subset of Java. And Google has used that for a lot of deploys. A lot of businesses around the world have used a lot of the GWT. And but they wanted a much more modern language, because Java, you end up typing in a lot of boilerplate. They wanted something that was nicer and slimmer, and that they could control from beginning to end. And so, and not to mention that there's this ongoing thing between Google and Oracle, but I won't get into the politics of that. So they said, let's replace it with our own language that we can compile, we can use on server side, that we can compile to JavaScript for browser side. And the mistake they made was having people think that because for development, they released a version of Chrome that had Dart embedded in it. Everybody was thinking, you're not going to get Safari to do that, and you're not going to get IE to do that. And so eventually they said, no, we're going to concentrate on the Dart to JavaScript compilers, so that we can have the same experience in all the other browsers. And that was really cool. So that was fun. Okay, then the mobile team, the Chrome team said, we've got Chrome on our mobile devices, but in order to write really smart applications, there's a lot of legacy stuff in the Chrome engine. And so this experiment, they stripped out everything they could, because I was all supporting legacy JavaScript, legacy HTML elements, things like that. But they couldn't get it to go fast enough. Well, it turns out, apparently, I may have the story slightly wrong, but the Chrome team was sitting like right adjacent to the Dart team. And they said, is there some way you could have Dart target ARM code so we could compile actual Dart code into things that run well on mobile devices? And that became Flutter. So I should speed up the story, sorry. That became Flutter, and it was originally just intended as a way of running iOS and Android, running roughly the same code. So instead of having stuff that was using JavaScript, you could have you would be writing in Dart, which is a much nicer language than JavaScript, I've got to say. Okay, so that was sort of the story for a long time, and everybody thought, well, isn't Flutter just another React Native then? I mean, how is it different from that? And why should I do that? Because I get a lot more support for React Native. But then the Flutter team said, we might be able to just put this on the desktop. And so they did. They figured out a way to compile it down to things or a platform that would actually run on Linux, Mac, and Windows. Now that's pretty mature at this point. So you can actually, if you think of it as, what's the name of that toolkit that ran Atom? Is it Atom or Electron? You think of it as like Electron, except you're coding in Dart. And so you use the same Dart stuff. And what's weird is it's the same Dart stuff that you're using with Flutter. So now here's Flutter on the desktop, Flutter on iOS, Flutter on Android. Let's not stop there. How about Flutter compiled to the web so that instead of using Dart native, you can use the same Flutter code, which is really elegant stuff. And so you can go on, 7 code bases now, seven platforms. And that's not quite there yet, the programming to the web, but it enabled them to do some pretty amazing things. So there was this thing called DartPad that was around for a while, well, it's still there, where you could test little Dart programs, Dart talking directly to web or Dart talking on the command line directly in there, but you couldn't do Flutter. So once they had, Flutter to the web, they could actually add that sort of thing to the this DartPad thing. So if you go to dartpad/dev, you'll see that you can actually make your own in-browser Flutter apps. So you don't have to install anything. You can still play with Flutter. So I'm pretty excited about all that. Also, let's see, I got to remember what's under an NDA and what isn't. Like I said, I'm a GDE, so I have restrictions. Okay, public information about Fuchsia is limited, but it's been said that Fuchsia's design is all about IoT. So you think you've got great options already for IoT. Imagine writing the same Flutter code to run on your Pi, on the thing on your refrigerator, dashboard for automotive, and Fuchsia is possibly going to be, again, there's speculation because nobody inside Google is describing what's going on, but they're actually watching who's migrating from one team to the other. It would be possible to, and I lost my train of thought, darn it. Fuchsia? No, okay, I can't remember, I lost it all. It'd be possible to just run the same thing everywhere. It's pretty amazing, pretty exciting. So, and efficiently too, because for iOS and Android, it compiles down to ARM code and native stuff. For web deployment, using the same Fuchsia code base, and you get pixel for pixel identical programs there. I was looking around earlier in this show for the link to the web demo. They actually took all the iOS and Android demos and put it out for the web, and it just dropped it in and it ran. So it was pretty fun. So anyway, I could keep going on. But I'm really excited about this. I'm really looking forward to continuing with that. I've got a business partner that's looking at writing a Flutter training course. So that would be similar to, for those who are familiar with it, our Learning Perl and Intermediate Perl. And I'm hoping to get that done soon, but there's only so many hours in the day. So I think that's about all I want to say about Flutter, but I might think something else before the end of the show, and it's my show, so I can say it when I want. Anyway, who had the next thing?
Well, actually, I wanted to chime in here. I mean, I think this Flutter, React Native, I mean, all these frameworks are really interesting. And it's interesting also to think back to the days of Java, when Java first came out, right? Right. The promise was write once, run anywhere, right? Now, it didn't actually, it sort of worked, but you needed a runtime, and the runtime was different for every environment, so you had to install the runtime. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, my code's kind of the same or similar, but end users, the burden kind of shifted toward the end users to install the right runtime on their environment. And the new frameworks like Flutter seem to be making this a lot easier for people, where it really is easy to either write once or write, minimally, right? You have your basic program, and then maybe a few changes here or there, or you build in some things to say, if I'm running on Android, for example, maybe have these little changes happen. But it seems to be a lot easier. There seems to be making it a lot easier for developers these days because, you can call it a mobile first world, which I believe is true, but there's a lot of things that still run on desktop or cross platform. And having something like this that's web based, I think, is super important. But it does seem to. Let me ask you one question though. It does seem to help if you have JavaScript background, right? It seems like when I used it was no.
It's spitting out JavaScript for you, so you're never having to touch that. It might be nice to know about if you just use Dart directly to the web, which is sort of one of the original things. You have to understand things like what the elements are, the attributes of each of the elements, things like that, which you would have to know from a Java world. But no, you actually don't need that. But I do want to say, I was eventually going to learn Objective-C and try to write some my programs for my iPhone. But I have 7 programs on my current iPhone that I wrote, and I haven't written a single line of Objective-C. And I'm using the toolkit that comes with Flutter, not having to learn the iOS native interfaces, which change over time. It breaks things. If your Flutter program is running on hardware all the way back to at least like 2 or 3 years ago, and they come out with new hardware, it'll just work. And that's really amazing to me. Yeah. All right, that's enough. It's enough on Flutter.
No, that's it's really interesting to think about. It's certainly one of the things that have been changing over the years. Another thing that's been changing over the years is Microsoft. And I remember the days. I don't know. I think I can tell this because Sun Microsystem's not around. But I remember the days when Microsoft was literally coming into Jonathan Schwartz's office. He gets a lot of flack, but he's actually a pretty smart guy. I remember him telling the story about Bill Gates coming into his office and threatening Sun with patent lawsuits for different things, right? I can't remember what they all were. I'm sure, like FAT file system and SMB and all that kind of stuff was part of it because of the networking stuff that was going on at the time. I remember him telling that story about how Bill Gates came in and threatened him with billions of dollars of lawsuits, and was kind of pointing his finger at him, like this. And luckily, Sun had such a portfolio of patents for various software that he was able to turn around and say, go for it. If you want to do that, that's fine. We will retaliate, right, with all these other things that we have patents for. And they had a huge patent portfolio. At the time, it was probably one of the biggest. So that didn't go anywhere. There was no lawsuits, and no major ones anyway. And so that was kind of an interesting time. Now, flip forward a decade, right, or so, maybe not even that long. And now we have Microsoft with Linux running inside Windows, right? You can install the, subsystem for Linux or something. And they've even joined the Linux Foundation.
Wow.
It's not quite a 180, but it's almost a 180. It's a 170, let's say. It's a 175. They've really embraced Linux. If you look at Azure, for example, I think Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud service, runs more Linux operating system environments than they do Windows operating system environments, I'm pretty sure, at this point. So it really is kind of crazy how the tide has turned. And I think there's some other examples too, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, so a couple of things I've seen. Microsoft just released their first Microsoft Office application for Linux, Microsoft Teams, which is just kind of mind-blowing. I guess we kind of got this through a backdoor via them buying Skype and Skype supporting Linux. But still, you've got Microsoft and their big, one of their crown jewels that's been been this way for a long time, the Office suite, and now they're starting to say, well, we'll support this on Linux. It's just unexpected when you look at what Microsoft has done in the past. It's pretty neat to see.
Yeah. Now I know I run Linux on the desktop for work. Do you also run Linux on the desktop, Jonathan?
Yes, pretty much everywhere. In fact, The few places where I've got to use a Windows desktop for working with people, I've gone to just running it inside a virtual machine.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in the same boat as me. And what I used to have to do, so I still have to do this actually until they potentially release the other applications on the desktop for Linux, is I have started going when I have to run like PowerPoint, which I do a lot because I work in environments where people use PowerPoint, as I've started using Office 360, right, or Office.com. And which isn't 100% compatible, but it at least gives me an easy way if I have to pull up there's something that doesn't work in Google Slides, for example. Luckily now you can just open up a browser, go to Office 365, and kind of get the same experience, right? Which is really great. But I love the fact that they're releasing more and more of this stuff for Linux, or really just to run anywhere, right? So, I mentioned the FAT file system and SMB network file sharing before. Mm-hmm. That was always a big conundrum as well, right? Because Microsoft kept threatening, oh, we've got these patents for file systems and we're going to come after you. But it seems like they've released FAT or exFAT for Linux as well, right?
Yeah. So at one point, and this was not too many years ago, Microsoft was making like $10 or $15 for every Android phone sold because they were charging for use of those F80 patents, the file system. And within the past, I think just a couple of months, Microsoft said, you know what we're going to do? The new exFAT, which is, their new and improved file system, we're going to publish the documentation and we're going to sign a promise that we're not going to come after anyone that uses this in the Linux kernel. And they didn't push any code, but they basically wrote it up and gave permission to the Linux guys to go ahead and pull one of these exFAT implementations into the kernel. And it's just mind-blowing because it's such a departure from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, for sure. I remember installing kernel mods to get FAT file system support back in the day, because the distros that wanted to be, completely open source, wouldn't include it. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a self-installable solution for you to go out and install the support for FAT and for SMB or CIFS. You could go out and do it on your own, but they couldn't, install it, or they couldn't include it in the kernel or include it by default, I should say. So
we can't talk about Microsoft without mentioning Visual Studio Code. A lot of times we ask people what their favorite editor is, and we're starting to hear people say, well, VS Code. And, that is an actual fully open source solution that runs everywhere. I've not checked it out. I've not installed it yet myself, but it's pretty cool.
It is. I use it for my all my Flutter and Dart stuff because it's actually the first time I've used with some sort of regularity an editor besides Emacs. So that says a lot. But there's great support. Google is providing a nice plugin for the three major editors, VS Code, Android Studio, and what's the third one? IntelliJ, either the community edition or the paid edition, and that gives it common behavior. So it really doesn't matter what you use of those three. You'll see a lot of the same things in the debugger and all that stuff. So it's really, really, really smart. Hey, we're almost out of time. In fact, we're probably a little over already. Is there any one headline that we didn't cover from each of you?
Well, I would say, just real quick, I would say that just continuing on even with this topic, it just happens to be in the same vein. I know it's not technically, I think it was before a year ago, more than 12 months maybe, but Microsoft buying GitHub is huge in my opinion as well, right? We didn't talk about that. It certainly has an impact on open source because that's where a lot of open source projects live. And I was kind of waiting with bated breath to see what the impact was going to be, because it's not always positive when an acquisition like this happens. But it seems to be working out. Microsoft seems to be letting GitHub do its thing. Of course, they're probably behind the scenes trying to ramp up the revenue, right, with their various programs that they offer and paid services. But I haven't noticed from my standpoint, and maybe you all work with GitHub more than I do, but I haven't noticed any measurable changes or intrusions on the way that GitHub works over the past year that would lead me to be really down on the service. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I'm trying to remember. It seems like there was something that GitHub rolled out that they had to step back pretty quickly afterwards, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was. So no, I don't have anything other than that.
Wasn't it that you could now do multiple free open source repositories, whereas before it was just one? It was something like that. They changed something on there. But anyway, we're out of time. And Jonathan, any headline that you want to say? And that only means slug. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. There was one big one that really caught my attention. The National Security Agency, the NSA, the spooks there by Washington, D.C. that everybody loves to hate, released one of their big open source tools, or one of their big reverse engineering tools, as the open source project Ghidra, which was just out of left field and very unexpected. But apparently that is a really, really mature tool that a lot of people are making use of. Really cool to see.
Well, Reverb Mike asked the question of the day, or the question of the week, but all he says is blockchain. So I don't know what that means. Am I using it? Do I like it or whatever? So again, we got to wrap here. It was funny. My God, it's like we made it like an hour, and I was worried that we didn't have enough topics to cover. And now we're at the end of the show, and we're still trying to extend the show another few minutes. So we succeeded. Hopefully we were informative, and you guys can always give me feedback at the twit.community. Yeah, that's it. And there's a forum in there for FLOSS Weekly. You can always give me feedback about whether this worked or not. It's funny.
Hey, Randall. Why don't I've got a suggestion? Why don't people start in the forum, go to twit.community and start a thread with top open source news stories. I mean, we're at the end of the year, right? It's December. What do you think? What does the community think is the top open source news stories of the year that in your opinion? I'm sure there's hundreds more that we won't have time to get to. So somebody go in and start that thread and start chiming in.
Cool. And I also want to say, I still want to do the rundown of the upcoming shows. I'm still about 4 minutes away from the show, end of the show. But I also want to say that both of the guests apparently were watching this live stream, and they both wrote back and said, "Yeah, your mail all ended up in my spam folder." And I was, what? Too much aggressive filtering, I guess. Yes. Okay. So we normally do a recap of the show, but we were the show, so there's no point in doing that. Let's see. So upcoming next week, we have Rawlsteam, which is, I guess, Jonathan, you wanted to be on the show, so maybe you'll be coming back. That's a virtual tabletop software. Titan makes it easy to run your favorite database in a Docker container on your laptop. Kong is coming back because that's a multi-cloud and hybrid, next generation API platform for multi-cloud and hybrid organizations. We have the Apprentice program, which is getting more women into tech. Open Mainframe, which is exactly what it sounds like. Weave8, I'm cutting short here. Weave8 open source knowledge graph. That's a GraphQL RESTful API-based knowledge graph with a built-in semantic model called the contextuary. That's going to be a buzzword-heavy show. You can see all the rest of the shows that are coming up, get dates for those at twit.tv/floss. If there's a project not on there that you want on the show, have the community coordinator or project leader email me. By the way, I just noticed why I'm making so many mistakes today. According to my Fitbit, I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. So I'm running on fumes, basically. It's been really bad all day so far. Okay. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays. And if you had been there, you could have asked questions live to us. Always cool. Let's see. So follow us on @FLOSS Weekly on Twitter. Follow me at Merlin on Twitter. And you can, of course, join the forum FLOSS Weekly in the Twitter community. We do not have a show Christmas or New Year's, so I get 2 weeks off, which is really nice. Anything to plug there, Erin and Jonathan?
I don't think so. I just got back from Ignite and not just got back from Ignite, but just got back from reInvent for sure. Some great conferences. I am now. We're hitting the holidays, so I have a lull in my schedule right now. But I will say, if you're looking for a last minute gift idea for a family member or significant other, that loves the Raspberry Pi but doesn't understand Linux, there's a book you can buy. You can still get it in time for Christmas. It's Linux for Makers. Go check that out on Amazon or wherever. You can get free Prime shipping if you're a Prime member and get that book delivered, wrap it up, put it on the tree. Absolute top gift of the Christmas season, I guarantee you. Of course, tongue in cheek, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you can go get it. And I just want to wish everybody happy holiday season, happy New Year. Probably see everybody again in the next year, which is weird to say.
Yeah, it always is. And Jonathan?
So I'll just plug my normal plug, and that's the security column every Friday over at hackaday.com. Come and check out the security news from the week. And then if I can, Randall, I want to turn the tables on you. We talked about this just a little bit. Randall Schwartz, what is your favorite text editor and scripting language? Has it changed?
A little bit. Well, I think I've changed the question to not being just scripting language, just language in general. So that would be these days Emacs for anything that's not Dart and Flutter, and VS Code for Dart and Flutter. And I now realize that I can write command line tools in Dart. So I may be sort of leaning towards that now as my way of doing it. They actually released a tool in the most recent release of Dart that piles down to, it's kind of like Go, where it's a single standalone binary that you can just plop onto a system of the same type that you built it on. They don't have cross-platform yet, but you can just drop it down there, and it's a standalone. It doesn't need any libraries. It's all built together, and it works really cool. They just added that, so that's I'm interested in playing with that a lot more. And I want to say, since you're talking about your book, Amazon sent me a list of suggested book titles that I might be interested in. And the very first one was Learning Perl. I don't think they're going to make a sale on that. Not from me. I got tons of those at home. Regex support in Dart. It's more complete than JavaScript. They actually rewrote a bunch of stuff and so it compiles it down correctly. Anyway, guys, thanks for stepping in and being creative and having some questions we could answer and all that sort of stuff. So, thank you for stepping up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to talk about some of the news items that we've had over the year. I think it was a lot of fun. We should do it again next year. Maybe end of the year we can make it a tradition.
Well, or we can do it anytime a guest doesn't show up.
Yeah, true.
I should have been suspicious when my mail last Wednesday, which is the first time I start prompting the person to say, well, I still need the answers to our questions, things like that, and no response. And then another email Friday, no response. And then Saturday, no response. Sunday, no response. I was going, what? And then Monday, I got an email from one of them saying, so how do we get on the show? I went, I was sending you this information every single time. So yeah, it's okay. We'll figure it out. They even gave me a phone number I can call, so that'll be nice. Okay, we'll see you all again. I gotta go. We'll see you all again next week on FLOSS Weekly.